without further ado, let me get going. So better proposals for service companies. I want to give you a couple of details on being a participant in the webinar. You can post questions at any time in the dialog box. There's a Q&A box. If you'll use that one, please. I may not see the chat box. The sessions are being recorded if the technology gods are willing. And yes, it looks like I'm recording, so we're going to have that. I'm seeing a hand raised, so I know some of you might be able to hear me. And the handouts will be available on the online recording. So again, if you've got any questions, go ahead and post them in the question box as we go. I will strive to get to every single one of them if I possibly can. I want to thank, first of all, our featured sponsor today, which is AV Stummful USA. They're going to be at the LDI next week in Las Vegas, booth 2437. Stop by and say hello to the sales team there. Learn about their screen products and their soft good and drapery products. Great bunch of folks, good friends, and I hope you'll give them a visit. And I want to thank all of the AV Matters sponsors who make all of these webinars and so much of the content in the newsletter from AV Matters possible. Without them, well, we probably wouldn't be listening to me right now. So thank you very, very much. I am, of course, your presenter, Tom Stimson. I'm president of the Stimson Group. There's all the social media stuff. You already know how to find me because you're on the webinar. So why this webinar? And sometimes I wonder why I haven't done a webinar on proposals for so many years. And I think the reason why is I never understood what it was I needed to accomplish. We write proposals every day. And it came to me not too long ago as we're struggling, as I'm struggling to help my clients understand the service businesses that they're in, that what we're actually using to sell for most of us, whether we're in systems integration or live events, is we're using product proposals, and we're trying to sell service with product proposals. What should a service proposal look like? That's what the webinar is all about. So how do we convert from using product proposals to using a proposal that can sell a higher level of value? And because we're using product proposals, when we're trying to put value into a proposal, it turns into value add, which just means free. We put all the boxes and the itemized labor, and then we try and put something that will make the job better, and the client won't pay for it. So we end up giving it to them away for free. And we say that's part of our value add, which means that we're just going to leave money on the table. And if we had a better way of demonstrating the value of those things, then perhaps we could actually get some money for them and not have quite so much scope creep on our projects. Now, I've also found that we're often losing jobs on price because your value is not really apparent. I deal with really good companies all the time who lose to companies that they perceive, and maybe even I perceive, to be not as good as they are. All things being equal, they're going to lose on price because they're not doing a good job of making their value apparent enough. And I think proposals can help us with this. Now, you know me, salesmanship could make this a non-issue. But as we develop our salesmanship, we're going to find that we need a better proposal to support the salesmanship and those good salesmanship practices. So let's talk about what that proposal looks like. My mantra for the day is that I need to encourage you to stop selling at face value. Our product proposals sell things at face value. Your service is worth more than the sum of its parts. Okay? It's not the time and materials that you're selling. It's the fact that it's actually going to work, it's actually going to do what the customer needs, and that there's a human factor here and an intellect that you're offering to the customer that has value. When you say, we are so much better than brand X, you're always talking about a human factor. And that human factor is not apparent when you sell at face value. Now, if you are someone who's been on a lot of my webinars or followed me for a while, you know that before we respond to an RFP, I have a process that we go through called qualify, position, and close. It's a three-step process. The proposal is a last resort. I've sat in many offices. I have many clients, particularly new clients. When they get an RFP, their automatic response is, how quickly can we write a proposal? All right. They're skipping a lot of the processes and a lot of the steps that are very important to getting good value, both for you and for your client. The best proposal is always an agreement to something that you've already talked about and agreed upon. And it's simply a confirmation of previously held conversations. If you need better background on the qualified position and close process that leads up to writing a proposal, then go to my website, trstimson.com, go to the free webinars. The one right in the middle is Managing Requests for Proposals. That's where we explore the concept. Matter of fact, look at all the webinars because it probably comes up in most of them. Now, let's spend the rest of this time, this valuable time, talking about the service proposals. And I call it a service proposal because I want you to get away from thinking about product proposals. It's not that products aren't going to be involved in what you're presenting to your customers. We're just going to have to figure out how to stop leading with products and add products or include products in the service that we're going to provide. And as you see on the screen, there's 9 elements to a service proposal. And yes, every one of these appears in every single proposal to varying degrees. And we'll talk about the degrees as we get to the end of the webinar. So you need to understand what each one of these does and what their function is. And then as you learn how to apply them and find this, discover the different situations where proposals apply, you'll figure out which ones you need to emphasize at the right time. Now, I want you to think about as you go through this, and you're going to learn a different way of putting proposals about. And your first inclination is to think about the way you do proposals now and how different the process that Tom's describing is. Don't focus on the differences between how you're doing it. Think about how you're going to approach service opportunities differently. Because the proposal format that I'm going to explain to you is going to it needs different questions and a different conversation with the client before you get started on the proposal. And I really can't get into the whole details of how you talk to the client until you have an understanding of what the proposal is. So I suspect we're going to see a future webinar about how you have service conversations before you do a service proposal. Now, most of you are product companies. You're a hardware dealer, you're an equipment dealer that does systems integration, you're a rental company that does shows. We tend to lead with rental, we tend to lead with hardware, we tend to lead with hourly labor, and that's not leading with service. Service is, of course, about outcomes. What's the outcome we're going to provide for the customer? So think about that as we go through this webinar. And then find the thing in today's webinar that you can apply now. There's going to be a piece, and there's one piece in particular that I think will be very easy for you to apply now while you become more comfortable with the rest of it. So 9 parts, 9 service proposal sections in the proposal template. The first one is background or situation. All right. In the section on background or situation, this is where you explain why you're going to give the proposal you're going to give. And the purpose of this is to demonstrate that you took this request, you're taking this opportunity very seriously, you're looking beyond service issues, you understand the implications of what you're going to do. Most importantly, the background or situation statement is going to demand either careful consideration or immediate dismissal of your proposal. Win fast, lose fast. Most of your clients, most of your prospects don't read your proposals with any great detail. They skim through it. They look at the nice language, go, oh, good, they spelled that correctly, their grammar looks good, and they go and try and find the page with the pricing on it. If this statement, background or situation statement, is well executed, they will read the rest of your proposal. And as you see what this proposal looks like, you'll understand why that's important. So there's a difference between these two, by the way, background and situation. It's a background statement when you are fulfilling a need. So if you get a detailed RFP that says, provide me these things, you're going to do a background statement after you do a little due diligence. A situation statement is when you're involved in solving a problem. The problem is my attendees are not paying attention. The problem is the technology in our room doesn't work. Okay? So there's a subtle difference between the two things and when you might use them. And here's a situational example. There's a lot of words on the screen. Don't worry, you can download the handout. You can review this archive later. It has, in this case, 4 basic elements. The first is the statement of the premise. This is what the customer thinks they're about to get from you. A proposal to update the executive conference room. Very straightforward. The next piece is the customer's intent. Okay, what is this upgrade going to do? What is this update going to accomplish? It's going to address ease of use and reliability issues that exist with the current system. All right, 50% of a situation or a background statement are going to be customer driven. It's their words, it's their thoughts, it's validating that you heard what they're asking for. The other half is you. You've got to put something into this. You've got to provide more than face value in your proposal. So your high value contribution should include some sort of analysis or insight that comes from research. Again, this is why the work that we do before we write a proposal is so incredibly important. This is what we get out of the positioning phase of proposal development. So in this example, we've analyzed ABC Company's needs. We see their inability to seamlessly integrate remote attendees or allow the display of personal devices is affecting meeting attendance and participation. Now, the client may know that, but it's probably not in their RFP. It's probably not part of their original intent. But we're going to call out the elephant in the room that says, hey, not only does your room not work, it's not even current. And then we're going to add a critical consequence or a challenge to their premise that all they need to do is update the room. And what we're going to do here in this example, we're introducing some research that says, research has shown that organizations that stay on top of communications trends will perform at a higher level. This project will help ABC be one of those companies. And by implication, if they don't go through with this project and they don't go through it in the way that we're suggesting, they could be one of those companies that doesn't perform at a higher level. This is a terse, simplified situation example, but it has the 4 key elements that we're looking for in a service proposal. Now, right now, depending on who's in the room, who's sitting around the table, some of you stopped chewing your sandwich, you're looking at each other and you're going, holy crap, Tom, what are you talking about? You want us to tell our client that if they don't use this, something horrible is going to happen? I'm going, calm down. Think about why we're having this webinar. Okay? We're selling services through product proposals and we're leaving money on the table. We're not winning jobs against people who are only selling parts and pieces. Do you want to win the project by finding the customer's price and feature tolerance for your products? In other words, sell on price, or do you want to sell the value of your services? And if you can sell the value of services, you can finally, if you're an integrator, do service and maintenance agreements, get design fees or other services. If you're a live events company and you're trying to sell creative and you keep tacking it on to your equipment list and it won't sell, here's how you sell it. Okay? So we're going to have to do some scary things. And frankly, the opening statement is probably the scariest thing of all. Again, feel free to put in questions anytime that you want. I'll answer them live if I can. Otherwise, we'll get to the end of the webinar and we'll catch them all then. Section number 2 is goals and objectives. You can breathe a sigh of relief. We're just putting bullet points in now. You need a well-crafted situational statement. Okay? We've got to convince the client that we know what we're talking about, that we can communicate extremely well and get their attention. In goals and objectives, we can now list bullet points. What is it we're trying to accomplish? Whenever possible, we want to use the client's words and reiterate things that we agreed upon during our positioning conversations. And we also want to include intangible objectives, which you would probably not think about putting in otherwise. And we'll look at an example here. So here's an example of objectives. The original premise, install a reliable AV system that requires minimal maintenance or training. No argument there. A secondary objective or an implied benefit is that we're going to improve user satisfaction and acceptance. because we know that if we do, people are going to be more likely to use the room, the meetings are going to be shorter, they're going to pay more attention. Okay? An unsolicited benefit of another secondary objective is eliminate wasted meeting time spent on operating the technology. How many of you are sitting in a boardroom right now with a 8-year-old Crestron controller that only talks to half of the things in the room, and because you're using a laptop with an HDMI output to a monitor that's no longer connected to the control system because it's been replaced, had to go find the remote to get this webinar up on the screen? Okay, your clients are in the same situation. You wasted a lot of time. You had to get to the meeting early because you knew you were going to have to sort all of this stuff out. That's wasted time. And it makes a lot of companies very angry to see themselves wasting so much time on that kind of technology. And then we get another objective here, which is a tertiary objective. It's an unexpected benefit. You know, if we redo your conference room, it can be a marketing and branding showcase. You guys have never thought about that, have you? Or if you have, you didn't think it was possible. Well, I'm going to make it possible in my proposal. This is how we use the objectives to start to weave the future, the idea of what it's going to be like to do business together. So the third element in your proposal is the measures of success. Again, we're just in bullet points here. Measures of success answer the question, if everything goes really well, how will we know it? How do we know we've succeeded? You have some qualifiable and quantifiable bullet points that you need to put together here, and it's easier if I just simply give you some examples. Okay. Now, in your measuring success, you're going to talk about the things you're now going to be able to do. So in our basic scope, we have, here's the tools and functions. Hey, you're finally going to be able to put an iPad on the screen. You're finally going to be able to do this. These are the things you're now going to be able to do. We're going to reduce or eliminate technology time. In other words, we're going to reiterate that objective that we brought up earlier, and we can measure this. Now, we may not measure it, but just the fact that we can measure it is worth noting for both yourself and the client. We can reduce or eliminate repair time. If that room that you're updating has been down 20 days out of the last 365 or 20 days out of the last 250 business days, that's a significant amount. Okay? We're going to increase the productivity of their investment. Okay? Users will want to use the room. Well, wouldn't that be great? So that's something that we can qualify by asking people and having conversations. Meetings will become more efficient. That's also a qualifiable result. These are the things that the client's going to start thinking about and going, hey, Bob, would our meetings really be shorter if this stuff worked? And Bob's going to go, yeah, it'd be a lot shorter, Tom. That'd probably be a good idea. It gets the customer to start thinking about those things. The fourth section of the proposal is value to the company. This is not price. Price will come later. We will talk about dollars and cents in a minute. Value to the company is beyond price. This is where you talk about that return on investment. What's the return on investment for doing this project? And some people have asked me, why does there even need to be a return on investment? Well, there's generally is one, so if you don't call it out, you miss the opportunity to influence the decision maker who might think it's important. Very often we're talking to a gatekeeper or a purchasing agent or some individual who has their own agenda about what's important, and they're taking our proposal and they're showing it to someone else. We've got to make sure that our proposal speaks to that person too. That's why there are 9 sections on here. It's not because the person that you've been having a conversation with needs all 9. It's because the person who's going to approve their decision needs them. So in value to the company, you get to introduce your expertise. You get to demonstrate your understanding of the implications of this project. This is not just a boardroom refresh. This is not just a general session at a sales meeting. And this is something more important. So here's some examples of value. In your conversations with clients, you're going to have some anecdotal data or actual data, quantifiable data. They may have exit surveys from attendees at an event. They may have feedback from employees on the building, things like that. An example of value is remote meeting participation will increase sales productivity by 10%. The implication being that if salespeople don't have to come into the office to go to a sales meeting, they could be closer to their next appointment out in the field. Improved communications reduces mistakes. All of our customers have anecdotes about poor communications mistakes. Heck, you've got them. It's hard to find a client or an opportunity that won't admit that better communication would reduce mistakes. And here you are selling a communications product. Why wouldn't you bring that up? This is a value for consideration. And then we can have some observational or even quantified values of reducing meeting time. I did this with one of my clients. We restructured all of their internal meetings, and we found that by recasting the meetings and redefining who went to what meeting and actually increasing the number of meetings that they had, the horror, we actually reduced their meeting time by 25%. That turned into a lot of productivity for their team. 25% less time in meetings. They were doing 8 meetings a week. That was a couple of hours of increased productivity. Very easy sell. If in your conversations with the client you can uncover these values, why not restate them in your proposal? Because it's creating more value for the services that you're getting ready to put forward. Which, section 5, we've finally gotten to. Something familiar, a scope of work. This is just like you've done in the past, but we're going to make one minor modification to it. This is not just about the scope of work of the products and labor, the equipment and labor that you're going to put into the project. You're going to put customer experience into the scope. And you're going to make their expectations part of your expectations by putting them in the scope of work. So here's some examples. So your scope of work is a huge part of the document. You've got some standard sales scope of work. Part of this is my personal prejudice about using a sales scope of work, which means plain language, not engineering language, not technical language, and not a detailed list of all the things that it takes to do to deliver the end result. It's simply describing what the end result is like. Okay? Simpler language, very standard. Many of you are already doing this in some fashion. We want to address the customer experience. For instance, in this, I say we reviewed proposed solutions with key users and stakeholders before commencing work. In other words, you're not just going to sign an agreement and then we're going to tell you we're going to show up in 3 weeks. We're going to actually sit down, and that is part of the scope of work to make sure that you are comfortable with what we're doing all the way through the process. You're reviewing final installation and stakeholders. That's boilerplate scope. But then you're going to add an unexpected improvement. Produce a 3-minute training video. Whenever I bring this up at integrators, it's like there's that smack my head moment when they go, "Oh, wow, that would be easy." Your room should be really easy to operate, right? It should be intuitive when you walk into a room. Why not produce a training video? But that's another story about dealing with integration proposals. We have the same sort of unexpected improvements that we can introduce into our live event proposals as well. Customer experience is a big part of the scope, so providing transparency in the billing process. I have a client who was dealing with an RFP where the RFP was very clear that transparency was a huge concern. And if we had followed my client's standard proposal format, we would have never been able to call out transparency. And so we adapted this service proposal so that they could put transparency in there. And guess what? It got them to the next round. It was a opportunity for them to get in front of the client on the next round. They weren't dismissed on the first round. It was extremely valuable, all because they were able to put transparency into their scope of work. So completing all of the above by or in a certain way will tie into mutual accountabilities, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So just introduce customer experience into your scope. make them feel like they are involved with it and that their expectations are going to be met, and that because it's in your scope of work, you're not going to overlook it. Now, before we move into the next section, I want to talk about options. Because in scope of work, we have the basic objectives. Scope of work will fulfill the main objectives. We're going to refresh this boardroom. Everything's going to work to this specification. Options are a powerful way to sell services. Options are not about substitutions. Options are not about putting a 100-inch screen in instead of a 70-inch screen. That's not what I'm talking about. Options are about additional value for the customer's consideration. We want to drive a higher perceived value for the original offering. So let's look at a little bit what that is. So here's an example of optioning in a proposal. So in the scope of work, option number 1 here, deliver project scope by stated deadline. That's the scope of work we just described. That's that original project criteria, the customer experience, everything that was on that slide 2 slides ago, okay? That's option 1. We'll meet all the expectations and objectives of the project. Option number 2 is, I'm going to put in a secondary objective. I'm going to give them an opportunity to buy up into a better situation than what they've had in the past. So I'm going to take my standard project scope and I'm going to add 12 months of unlimited service, training, removal and reinstallation of warranty repair items. In other words, a 1-year service agreement. And I can put a number to that. That's a secondary objective. It's optional. We can meet all the client's objectives just by delivering option 1. But option 2 might have more value for them if we present it separately. Option 3 is what I call our best customers choose. It's the highest value. In this example, we're going to add unlimited training, maintenance, R&R, and extended warranty for 3 total years. In other words, we're going to take option 2 and we're going to stretch it out for 3 years, which is adding extended warranty because most of your equipment warranties run out after a year, correct? So option 3 that's a huge deal. They're going to have no additional cost of ownership for 3 years. That's going to be extremely valuable to someone. It's going to be valuable to you because you're going to put a good mark on here and this is a very high margin sale. But they wouldn't consider it if you just tried to tack it on or slip it into your scope of work. Okay? We need to present it as an enhancement to the objectives that will increase the value and the measures of value that we've already presented. So there's one example. Let me give you an example for the live events guys, because you have different ways of adding value. So let's say we were doing a scope of work for a general session meeting with documentation recording. Okay, great. Let's write that proposal. Let's write that scope with the original project criteria. Well, we all know what documentation recording is. It's exactly what the customer didn't want when the job is over. So what we can do is give them 2 options. Their secondary objective would probably be to present this documentation recording to someone. Maybe they think it's just documentation, but the fact is they always want to use it. So we're going to edit the videos. We're going to give them standard intro and outros. We'll put their branding onto the video and hand it back to them. That's a nice secondary objective. We can put a price on that. Our best customers, however, would choose the advanced editing, the custom graphics, and we're going to develop a web portal so that you can have paid viewing of your event and sell subscriptions or sell viewings or whatever it might be. In other words, we're going to creatively come up with something that's going to add to the value of what you've just invested in. So thinking a little bit ahead for them, providing a greater service for them, and putting that into options. It may not matter to the customer. They may go, well, I don't really need option 2 or 3. I'm happy with option 1. That's fine. The primary function of option 2 and 3 is to make option 1 more appealing. Think about that. Because you've got contrast and they see that they've made the right narrowed down choice. They've picked what they need. The client has picked what is best for them on this job. Okay. Now, there are other types of options. I just gave you two kinds of examples. You can have options that accelerate the timeline or make timelines more flexible. This is very handy for installation projects. You could add design sessions or give clients the opportunity to do technology demos before they make their final decisions. A documentation package. You know, when I first started consulting, one of the things that amazed me about systems integrators is they put documentation on every installation, and they're doing the giant 3-ring binder with every manual and everything. And they don't really do that anymore because customers don't want it, you know, as-built drawings. But sometimes you need that. Okay, give it as an option. Help the client see that they're not paying for it anyway by putting it somewhere else. Premium crew and staffing, creative financing. You can do options that are different ways of looking at payments. Okay. I got a question right here I want to answer real quick. The question is, if they do not want 2 or 3, will they expect a price reduction? Well, no. Option 1 has a price, option 2 has a price, option 3 has a price. And option 3 doesn't exist without option 2. So when you do optioning, it's option 1 is $100. Option 2 is everything that's in option 1 plus these additional things is $120. Option 3 is everything that's in options 1 and 2, and it's $170 plus this other thing. Okay, so they're not going to expect a price reduction because you've already told them what the price is. What they know and what makes option 1 appealing to them is they know they're not paying for the stuff that's in option 2 or 3, because you're not going to give it to them because they didn't ask for it. It's a good question. By the way, yes, this recording will be available later. Everything's always recorded. It'll be on the avmatters.com website by Monday morning. Typically, it'll be there by the end of today. Before we move on, one more thing about optioning and scope of work. Unbundling. Bundling is very common in our industry. We bundle things together. We put value adds into stuff, and value adds that are bundled tend to not generate any profit for the seller, and often they don't really represent additional value to the buyer because they're free. If you're struggling with figuring out how to do options, the first thing you need to do is unbundle everything. If you're a live event company and project management is included for free, you automatically do a drawing, you automatically do a site survey, and whether you think you're charging the client for it or not, unbundle all of that. Take it all out. Because that's a great option 2 thing. And if you put those unbundled value adds with a price into option 2, and then put another thing into option 2 with a price, you actually get a better bundle. You actually accomplish what bundling is supposed to accomplish. But because we've bundled everything together without its value, stripped it of its value, we lose the opportunity to make money. So think in terms of how can you unbundle things more effectively so that you can better represent the value. Which brings us to section number 6 on your proposal, and that's a timeline. I'm not going to talk a lot about timelines because if you're an integrator, timelines are your life. But here's an opportunity to spell them out. And remember, timelines are duration, not end dates. If there is a hard end date on something, if the building is going to open at a specific time, everything times backwards from there. You can't take a process that takes 2 weeks to do and compress it because the client didn't make a decision or didn't let you finish another thing in time. So you have to call out contingencies. So if there's a deadline to move forward, we spell that all out in the timeline. You can put payments and other business-related milestones into the timeline because they're all tied together. This is particularly important if you're doing progress billing or if you've got a long, complicated project for live events. So the timeline is very important. I'm not going to spend any time on an example here because I think most of you will get this, because I want to talk about mutual accountabilities. This is section number 7. If you get nothing else out of this webinar or you have no other takeaway than this, then we've had a good day. Mutual accountabilities are going to have an impact. You can put it into your proposals right now. You don't have to change anything else. Just add this section, and you're automatically going to increase your credibility and therefore your value to the customer at least a little bit by doing this. Mutual accountabilities are simply a statement of what you agree to, what the customer agrees to, and what you jointly agree to. And it looks like this. You have a section called My Accountability. So your accountabilities say things like, I'm going to respond to messages within 4 hours. I'm going to notify you if I can't meet a deadline. My team's going to respect and cooperate when working in your space. I'm going to give you regular progress updates. Typically, this is going to be boilerplate. Once you've defined this, it'll be the same on most proposals. So it ends up being very standardized. However, you can introduce an additional accountability when you know the customer has a sensitivity about something. And here it is. You can call it out and you can use their words. But we also need something from the client. We want them, we're going to behave professionally. They're going to behave professionally too, and they expect to. So you will provide my team timely access to the workspace. You'll make appropriate personnel available for scheduled meetings and project reviews and commissioning and training. You will meet agreed upon deadlines for payments. It's really hard to deny these accountabilities. This is just good business. Actually, most of this time, it's just being a good human being. So customers will tend to agree with this. But they also see that you're agreeing to something, and you have mutual accountabilities. And I love this part. This is my favorite part. Should conflicts arise, we agree to notify each other and work towards a resolution. We're going to hold each other accountable for meeting the objectives. We're going to protect each other's proprietary information and intellectual property, and which of your clients is going to reject that statement? Okay. You're worried about the intellectual property of your proposal being given to another supplier and losing your intellectual property. Why don't we just put some expectations in here so that we can all say, hey, we understand how we work and play well together. So I find that these accountabilities are a great way to elevate the conversation with the client. And once the project is ongoing, you have a means, you have an avenue for going back to the customer and saying, hey, we're having a problem here. I'm trying to get this person to meet us for a meeting because we can't move on. We can't finish the installation until they sign off on this. Can you help me with that? They go, oh, no, I'm too busy. Then you can say, well, in our proposal, we agreed that we would help each other with this sort of thing. So can you find some time to do that because it's really holding up the project? So you've got it in writing that you're going to work and play well together. This is a great way to help move things along. And it's also a way for the client to hold you accountable, which has value. It's not a one-way street. Terms and conditions, which you already have, they don't change that much. This is where I put in pricing and fees. Okay? Pricing is what we put on things that are quantifiable, objects, an hourly rate. These are prices. Fees are what we charge for intellectual property and service. Okay. Pricing and fees, and each option has pricing and fees. Now you can just wrap those two together and say the price for option one or the fee for option one is $100. The fee for option two is $120. That's all this needs to say in terms and conditions. But then you also have to bring in the contract or agreement deadlines. You know, we need to sign and countersign this agreement. Here are the payment expectations. How do you handle change orders? All the terms and conditions that you normally put in there, and many of which is boilerplate. Make sense? So not much change in terms and conditions. And the final section, thank goodness, is the confirmation. And the confirmation section, it has two parts. The signature page is self-explanatory. It's how we convey the document back and forth to each other. Okay. Next steps, we're going to talk about in just a minute. I want to answer a question real quick. The question is, when or how do we deal with the fine print legalese? Our boilerplate is long and scary. Thank you. That's a fantastic question. First of all, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice, and I wouldn't presume to. However, get rid of it. As soon as you put legalese into your proposal, they've got to show it to their attorney. A signed proposal, a signed agreement is still a legal document. It is still a contract. However, if you put legalese in there, all of a sudden the attorney's got to look at it, which means they're going to get hold of it, and you know what attorneys are going to do to it, earn fees. And now you've got to take it to your attorney because you don't understand what their attorney did. If you can get the fine print legalese out of your agreement, more power to you. If you're a rental company and you've got that old rental agreement boilerplate language, and I know exactly what it is because everybody's using the exact same one. They've all copied it. That's a rental agreement. If you're doing a show for someone, you're not in a rental situation. You're in a service situation. Think about dumping it. But, how I said, that's not legal advice. Good question. In this final section on confirmation, you have a chance to put in next steps. Next steps are also something you could put in right away. Okay. This is where I reiterate this quote is good until, or how long the quote will last, because that's also going to appear in your terms and conditions, but let's reiterate it here in next steps. Okay, and you may say something like, your next step is I need a verified signature, or we need to have this meeting, or upon confirmation, we'll schedule the project launch meeting at your location. You can make it as grand or wonderful or enticing as you want it to be, but it helps the customer understand what's going to happen. Because too often it looks like all they do is they sign this and it goes back into the ether and we don't know what to expect afterwards. Let's spell it out in our proposal and I think you'll have more impact. I got a comment here from someone who says it may be prudent to state that the work shall be carried out during regular business hours. That sounds like an integrator to me because live events guys do not know what regular business hours are. But if it's something that you need to spell out, or if it's important to the client, because your client may not want you to work during business hours. They may want all the work to take place between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So whatever it is, you can put that into your terms and conditions or into the scope of work as a customer expectation. Another question here about unbundling. Are you suggesting we list design, drawings, site surveys, etc. as line items? If these services are currently included, how would we rework our proposals to identify and illustrate their value? That is the question of the day. Right? And there's a longer answer to that question, but the short answer is if you actually understand the value of design, drawings, and site surveys, and you can line item them, then you can unbundle. And what you're going to find is you've not been putting them into your price. You've been treating them as value add, which is free, and you've been building extra margin in to your dealer model of equipment and labor. What you will typically find when I work with integrators on recasting their proposals, because this sounds like an integration question, recasting their proposal is we have to move margin. We will typically reduce the expected margin on equipment in order to be more competitive, raise the expected margin on anything related to labor or service, and extraordinarily raise the expectation for things like, design and drawings and site surveys, because those are extremely valuable, because without them, the project may not go well. Okay. I got another question here about where would you put creative in the proposal? If creative is the project, creative's in the scope of work. Okay. So it can be an option 1, it could be an option 2, and it can be an option 3. If you are trying to take a rental customer or an event customer and turn them into a creative client, then I'm going to put that into option 2 most likely. So I'm going to make the creative, I'm going to improve their project by adding creative. So option 2, so option 1 is we meet your scope of work, pipe and drape, speakers on sticks, blah, blah, blah. Option 2 is we're going to sit down with the design team and bring a visual credibility to your event that will help the attendees better retain and enjoy the experience. Okay? That's where you're going to put in creative. So it's going to be in one of the options. Otherwise, you're going to poison your original scope. If you put it in option 1 and it's not part of the RFP, you're going to poison your option 1 with it. Or you're going to have to give it away for free, which is, well, worse. Another question here, in pricing, would you show itemized pricing or system totals? I'm going to get to that in just a minute. With pricing on the internet clients love to validate. Well, yes, they do. Find better clients, but I'm going to address that in just a second here. Well, hey, right here. So in addition to the 9 sections I just talked about, you also have a place to put everything else in the addenda, okay? Your proposal is everything what we just talked about. In your addenda, the secondary document, you can put the marketing collateral that's cluttering up your proposal right now. You can put the project concept drawings, or the signal flow drawings or things like that into the addendum. If you need to put an itemized product list, or if the client is insisting on itemized pricing and you're still willing to talk to them, then you would put it into the addenda. And the fact is, you're not going to do a service proposal for an itemized pricing shopper. So this doesn't matter in that situation. Itemized shopping is still itemized shopping. Give them an equipment list. They're going to go shop it on the internet. You're going to do that at your own risk. Same thing with rental. If it's a rental customer, it's not a service job. So don't bother with this proposal format. But if you're trying to deliver an outcome, you're trying to deliver a finished installation and they're asking for itemized pricing, go back to the video, qualify, position, and close. Find out what it is you're not doing right. You're either failing somewhere in the qualification process or in the positioning process, because that's not a relevant conversation for a high-value outcome. Biographies, you can put lots of stuff into that addendum. So that gets us through it. I know this is a lot of information in a very short amount of time, because there's 9 sections here, plus the addenda, and there's so many permutations, and your questions are fantastic. But I want to suggest right now that you look at this again. You'll probably want to review this and think about the 9 sections as, pots on the board or sliders. You're going to increase or decrease them depending on the situation. Let me give you some examples. There are 4 primary types of RFPs or proposal scenarios. The first one is a best offer. This is what we think we see all the time. The client says, here's my RFP, I need the best price. Well, God help you. Assuming you've had all the conversations, assuming that you've determined that this is a service proposal that you need to do and not just an equipment pricing proposal, then you want to focus on Section 2 objectives and Section 7 mutual accountabilities, and probably on terms and conditions, payment options. These are the 3 things that are going to have the most effect on the best offer customer. You may not be the lowest offer, but you can create the most value for your price focusing on those 3 areas. Another type of RFP is the moving to the next round RFP, where they're not going to choose from the 20 vendors that they solicited proposals from, but they're going to take the 3 to 5 best responses and then have you come in, do a capabilities pitch, do a little bit more due diligence on you, tighten up the RFP, and go back again. So if you're in that first round, moving to the next round proposal, put a lot of energy into that first section, the situation. Okay? Make sure that the objectives are well stated and that the measures of success will set you apart. Your job right now is to not look like everyone else. Well, number 1, provide a proposal that doesn't look like everyone else. And 2, focus on things that are in customers' terms. Situation is customer term, objectives are customer terms, measures of success are customer terms. Okay, that's where you want to put your energy. A spoiler bid or a courtesy bid, I often call them courtesy bids. That's when you've been sent an RFP, but you're not going to get the job because there's an incumbent, or you already heard that somebody else got the gig. You're just being asked to put together a proposal to keep somebody else's numbers honest. It's a spoiler bid. If you feel that you need to respond to this and you have good reason to, then elevate secondary objectives. The incumbent or whoever you're bidding against is going to get all the primary objectives in spades. Don't even spend a lot of energy there. Just state them, but put your energy into secondary objectives. Focus on the value of what you do, and then go crazy on option 3. Option 1 is the original scope of work. Option 2 is a high value addition to it. Option 3 is something no one ever thought about. Produce a television show for them. Just go off the map, okay? Because that at least might get you a conversation that will allow you to stay in the running a little bit longer, or actually make it a competitive opportunity. Repeat customers. Many of you are already thinking that my regular I can't send them this proposal. We've been sending proposals that look the same way for years. I can't introduce this to them. Well, of course you can. Okay. Here's how it works. Say, for instance, you've got a client. They do maybe 10 events with you a year, or you do installations on their campus. So you've got little projects all the time. One day, and it's probably the next time they call you, they're going to say, "Hey, Tom, I've got this project. This is a little weird, man. I really need to find a creative solution. They don't have a lot of money. We've got to, cut whatever corners we can. Don't put any frills in here. This is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to introduce an optioning proposal, and you strip out all the value adds that you normally give them, and you separate them and give them value so they can start to see what that value is on this job." Okay. So that's your opportunity with a repeat customer, is to introduce a new way of looking at a proposal and have a new discussion. Now, you should never send a proposal and not have an opportunity to discuss it afterwards. So hopefully you'll be able to walk them through this new proposal format. All right. Now, I'm going to pause here for a couple more questions if we have them. In a moment, I'm going to talk about my closing comments, and I've got some tips and tricks I just want to reiterate to you before we go. Anonymous viewer, will you be attending LDI? I said, I will know by Friday morning whether I will be or not. So if you want to send me an email, this is really the first time I haven't been to LDI in about 10 years, but I think I have something better that I want to do here in Dallas this weekend. So I haven't made the decision to go, but thanks for asking. Any more questions or comments? You guys have been great. Everybody's typing, everybody's spelling is wonderful. I'm really proud of you. Good job for a Friday. Before we close out here, I want to bring to your attention a product that I have called the Business Survival Call. We have a monthly call. We have an executive track and a sales and marketing track where we get to talk about stuff, answer your questions in more depth, bring up new subjects all the time. You get to submit questions that we talk about. If you'll visit my store, trstimpson.com/store, and look at the Business Survival Call, we have some calls archived. And again, we have it, I think it's the last Friday of every month. It's been a great time. We're getting great response, and we'd love to have some more folks join us. I've also got a workshop for you live events guys coming up in December. 2 days of taking your business to the next level. I have a ton of content for you. We're going to be sending out the homework here in just the next day or so, and you'll want several weeks to get ready for this. I've got 3 to 4 hours of videos that you're going to want to watch. I have a lot of articles that you're going to want to read and get up to speed on, so that we can come in and have a very productive 2 days helping you build a better business plan, a better marketing plan, learn how to run your business better. It's at a great venue. It's in Dallas. You're easy to get to. We're going to have some wonderful meals and have some good time together. So check that out and get registered for that as soon as you can. And again, I want to thank our sponsors for making all of this possible. And let me share some tools, tips, and tricks with you. One of the things that I use fairly often, and you've seen it in the examples that we've shared today, is counterintuition. In order to be effective at selling services and selling solutions and selling outcomes, we're going to have to challenge assumptions. And by challenging assumptions, we have the opportunity to introduce our knowledge and our expertise into the situation. You have to be brave. We can't live in a world of fear that the client's going to reject us. When the client expresses an objection or a question, that's a sign of interest. So for goodness sake, be more interesting. And counterintuition is a way of doing that. Unspoken issues, elephants in the room. You need to call those out. Ignoring them makes us wonder whether you actually saw them in the first place. So call out the unspoken issues and find out how important they are. Redirects. Clients are they're gonna go, gosh, I'm not sure that's important. They're gonna ask questions that are uncomfortable. You need to redirect these into something that helps you with your business objectives. And very often, if the client says, well, you guys really look like you know what you're doing. I just don't think we're ready for you. You need to say, well, stop right there. Let's find out if you're ready for us. Why don't we get you to come over to the office, meet some of the team. Let's talk about your project. We can show you some other projects we've done. Use it to trigger an invitation. Okay. And if you've been to any of my webinars, you know how important invitations are for developing relationships with customers. Even if they don't accept your invitation, the fact that you extended one is very valuable. So we have to learn how to use redirects in order to keep the conversation going so that they can spend more time learning about the value that you're going to bring to the situation. Let's see. And final thoughts, I got one more question here. How do you position yourself to receive client feedback on an RFP in case you are not selected? Fantastic question. Well, first of all, never send a proposal without a scheduled date to review it. And the language that I typically use is I say, I'm going to send you a proposal. And whether it meets your needs or not, can we schedule some time right now before I send it to you that we can talk about it? I value your feedback. Okay, help me understand how I can do things better. Help me understand what I understood correctly, and schedule that in advance. Okay, and this is something, hopefully you're having human-to-human conversations and not trying to do high-value service business by email. Most of us are sitting in front of our calendar and say, open up your calendar right now. I've got mine open. You know, what's next Thursday look like? Can you do 10 a.m.? Okay, all I need is 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes of your time. Well, can I send you an email? I said, I'd really rather hear your voice. Okay, so yes, position yourself by scheduling it and making that an expectation and a professional courtesy, and I think you'll have more success. So some closing thoughts here. I want you to think of the concept of proposal a little bit more creatively. Okay? It's not something that's going to go out there and magically transform the customer if all we're doing is putting a bunch of detail with a price on there. We've got to provide something that mirrors what we've already talked about, but introduces ideas that are very attractive and thought-provoking. Okay? You have potential value for yourself and for your customer. You have more margin available, and it's hiding in the proposal that you haven't been writing. A better proposal will uncover value. We call it, for my clients that use the optioning methodology, we call it option 3 moments. And there's nothing better than writing a well thought out option 1, 2, and 3, thinking that option 3 was a throwaway and having the customer come back and said, you know what? This makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what we wanted to do. We've been talking about that for years, but nobody's ever brought it up before. Boy, that's fantastic stuff. And I will tell you, your option 3s are always going to be extremely profitable if you know what you're doing. Proposals, better proposals, you're going to better define success and you're going to increase customer satisfaction. Customers who are told what to expect and actually get it are more satisfied than customers who are just well taken care of. You know, let's use a dining experience. I use restaurant metaphors all the time. You can go to a diner and have a wonderful dining experience and have the waitress take great care of you. And you might not think twice of it, but if you go to a 5-star restaurant and get taken care of very well, your satisfaction is much higher because you expected to be taken care of. Okay? And that may sound a little bit counterintuitive, but think about proposals. A proposal with no value doesn't raise any expectations at all. It's very easy for the customer to dismiss it, but a high value proposal is difficult for the customer to dismiss. And whatever you do, do not run out and write a 9-point service proposal on your next job. Find a low-risk opportunity and refine your technique for conversing with the client, talking about value, talking about measures of success, talking about goals and objectives, so that you can start having the content that you need to build a better proposal. And then when you do have a low-risk opportunity with a client who's interested in an alternative approach, try the proposal out. Schedule that phone call with them for feedback. And if it turns out that you failed, say, all right, this was an experiment. Can I send you a proposal that's a little bit more conventional and I think it'll meet your needs? Okay. Would you let me do that? And they probably will. So find a low risk opportunity, find somebody that'll play with you, and I think you'll have some great success. So as a reminder, this is going to be archived. It'll be on NavyMatters.com, later on TRStimpson.com. Your login will get you to that. You just have to go to the webinar page, go to past webinars. You should have no trouble finding it. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the fantastic participation today, because that really improves the quality of the webinar. It certainly helps my experience, and I hope it helped everybody else's experience as well. So thanks again. If you've got more questions, email them to me, and have a great weekend, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.